So, in today's video, I thought I'd take you through the process of how I built this diorama. So sit back, relax, and come along with me. Let's start with the base. I do have oval bases that fit the diorama well, but when I'm doing water textures, I like making my own with two-part putty. It fits the mold better, makes everything easier to apply, and helps avoid resin leaks for a cleaner finish. I create a clear divider on the base using putty, shaping it along the mold walls so that the liquid resin won't leak. This step is really important to make the later process much easier. Since I've had this miniature for many years, I clean and prep it before painting. One of the main mistakes beginners make is not really looking at the miniature before starting. Cleaning off any flash and getting it ready helps avoid surprises once we start painting. Since this miniature was going to be a gift for my brother, I wanted to add a slightly more detailed pattern on the horse's cloth. Being my first freehand work, I tried a simple repetitive pattern with straight lines so it wouldn't get too complicated, but I actually liked the result. Next, I started building the main structure using cork sheets. At the top, I leave a small channel where the water will flow before dropping down into the waterfall. Then I apply some ground texture and leave it to dry. While that dries, I move on with the miniature, starting with the horse's skin. Once the base is primed in gray, I start adding different shades of green, brown, and gray here and there without following any strict pattern. This helps create a more natural look once I dry brush it later. Now I start painting the area where the water will be with a blue base. This helps give a more vibrant and visually appealing result in the end. Now we're ready. Once everything is fully dry, I start dry brushing several shades of gray, going from darker tones to lighter ones. I also add a bit more ground texture in a few areas that needed it, then paint it brown and use the same dry brushing technique afterwards. Now it's time to add some resin plants. It was my first time using them, and I honestly really liked them. Since I was going to place them in some tricky spots, I decided to paint them separately first and glue them in afterwards. As I mentioned in a previous video, clear fishing line is really useful for creating water effects. It gives us a support to hold the resin. For the waterfall, I'm going to use several of these and place them strategically. I cover the areas where I attach the fishing lines with some ground texture, add a few more rocks, and finish with a final general highlight on the base. I also add some tufts of grass to give a bit more detail. You might be wondering, how did I end up with the waterfall finished? My first idea was to make a short explaining the process, and I recorded everything vertically. But when I was editing, I realized I hadn't filmed it in horizontal, so bear with me. I thought it was important to include it in the video anyway. So let's get to it. As I mentioned earlier, we start by gluing the fishing lines to form the structure of the waterfall. I paint the background of the water channel blue. Using gel water texture, which is more liquid than what we'll use later for the waterfall, we start applying it from top to bottom so the finish looks natural. It's necessary to apply several layers and let each one dry for 24 hours. So patience is key. Once the upper part is finished, we can start working on the waterfall itself. First, I paint the background white to create a foamy effect underneath the water. Using Vallejo water texture, I start building the waterfall itself. Since this one is a thicker gel, it's perfect for creating splashes, waterfalls, and all those kinds of water effects that aren't flat. Little by little, I build up the structure by applying the gel onto the transparent lines. It's important to do this step by step, letting the gel dry in between. With a bit of patience, I gradually connect the lines until I get the shape I want. It's a process that can take several days, so it's a good time to keep moving forward on other parts of the build. I paint the lower part of the waterfall white again to simulate the submerged bubbles. Using AK still water, I fill in the lower part. As a quick tip, I can tell you that this product loses a bit of volume as it dries. So just like before, it's better to apply in several layers and let it dry in between. I keep adding layers until it reaches the edge of the mold properly. To finish it off and give the water a bit more texture, I apply water gel to shape the movement of the water. Once that's dry, I use water texture to create the foam effect. And here I can give you a little tip for using this last product, because at first I wasn't really sure how to work with it. You can mix it with a tiny bit of white paint to give it more color. And once it's applied, just as it starts to dry, you can tap it gently with an old brush. That helps build up the foam effect and makes it look much more realistic. And with that little detour out of the way, let's move on to the final part of the video. Once Tyrion's miniature is finished, I move on to the Dark Elf. Since I want the diorama to be displayable both with and without the Dark Elf, I'm going to add magnets so it's easy to swap them in and out. And let's be honest, everything is just cooler with magnets. I glue Tyrion into place, and with that, the overall composition is finally done. Next, it's time to start adding the snow. For this, I'm going to use these two products. There are all kinds of snow effects out there. Frozen snow, slushy snow, and everything in between. But in my case, I was aiming for a more realistic powder snow. And this is the method I found that gives the best result. First, I apply AK Snow Terrain, and then I sprinkle some AK Microballoons on top. And I can honestly say, the final finish looks really good. And with a few final touches, it's ready. I have to say, considering it was my first time trying some of these techniques, like making a waterfall or working with snow, I'm really happy with how it turned out. I hope you've enjoyed the video as much as I enjoyed working on this project. If you have any questions about the process, feel free to leave them in the comments. And if you like what I do and don't want to miss future projects, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.